Hey, Strategy Simplified. This Bain mergers and acquisitions case example features Austin, the aspiring consultant, and Cara, the MBB interviewer. Now, Austin is a second-year MBA student looking to transition from the Big Four to strategy consulting at firms like McKinsey, Bain, and BCG. To give you perspective on his level of case prep, at the time of this interview, he had completed around 30 or so out-loud cases with a partner. Now, Cara is a management consultant coach and former Bain and Company consultant, and works with consulting and product management candidates to help them break into their target roles. Learn more about Cara at the link in the show notes. If you enjoy the episode, please leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts to enter yourself for a chance to win a management consultant consulting prep course of your choice. Just email us to let us know, podcast@managementconsulted.com. All right, let's get into the session. Can Austin solve the case like a Bain consultant? Keep listening to find out.
So today, Austin will be running a case called Media Merger. The prompt is, our client is a major U.S. media company based in New York City. It has agreed to merge with another top media player based in Los Angeles. They have made the decision to combine operations into one building and will choose one of their existing buildings to be the new headquarters. They are not sure which one is more suitable. Question for you is, which location should they choose?
Okay, just as a quick recap. So two companies are about to merge, one in New York and one in LA, and they're trying to combine and then find operational synergies. So they're trying to look for the best location for a new headquarters. Does that cover the? Yeah, okay. I would like to clarify a few questions. Okay. So I don't know how many locations do they have, and how many locations do they have?
Yeah, that's a great question. So they just have the New York location and the LA location, and so the choice is just between one of those two.
Okay. Is there any peculiar information as regards to the New York location and the LA location to help me decide which to advise them to choose on? So what are the peculiarities about the New York location and the LA locations?
Yeah, certainly. What would you like to know about these locations?
So since it's a media firm, they don't know anything about their landmass, about the tech capability of the locations, any of such data.
Yeah. So for the New York location, they occupy 200,000 square feet. And then the LA location, that building occupies 400,000 square feet. But the client requires 100,000 square feet of space. You can also assume that any space that they do not use can be subleased out, so they can rent out any square footage they're not using. They have annual leases at both these buildings with a 10-year commitment. And so regardless of which location is chosen, they need to pay rent for both locations. Finally, the chargeable price for subleasing is $40 per square footage in New York City and $30 per square footage for LA.
Okay. I would like to take a minute to clarify my structure, if that's okay.
Got it.
Hey, Strategy Simplified. Are you looking to develop your executive presence this year? Then enroll in the Executive Presence Intensive taking place on January 16th, 2023 from 12 to 3 p.m. Eastern or 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Pacific. The intensive is a live training session led by Stephanie, and it's broken up into 3 parts. The first is executive communication, because without being able to concisely communicate ideas to gain buy-in, you'll have a difficult time progressing in your career, especially at more senior levels. The second is perception, because executive presence isn't just about what you communicate, but how. The third part is application, We'll practice what we're learning through live exercises in the session. We'll also include plenty of time for Q&A so you can get all your questions answered in a small group format. Again, the Executive Presence Intensive happens January 16th, 2023 from 12 to 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Are you ready to level up your career? Learn more about the intensive and reserve your seat at the link in the show notes. Okay, let's get back to the episode.
Okay, so I would like to look at this in terms of I'd like to look at this in like considering three areas. I'd like to look at the current company. What's the size of the current company? How are they growing since they decided to merge with the new company? I'd like to understand more about the current company. Then I'd like to look at as well about the company that's been acquired. I'd like to know the revenue, the profits, and then their market share. And then I would like to look at the acquisition strategy, right? So they're trying to acquire this. So I believe that since they're trying to acquire this, so I see them trying to get some operational synergies. So this is in terms of cost saving in terms of rent. But then there are other factors I'd like to consider, like are there other synergies that could be gained from this transaction? Say revenue wise, like are there other complementary products that are in New York City or LA? Is there any intellectual property that will be gained from being in any particular location or any peculiar advantages? I would also like to consider, since you have two different locations, which syncs more with the market. Is it LA or is it New York? And then which one has an established channel? Is it LA or is it New York? So I believe looking at these three ports, I'll be able to properly advise which location they should choose.
Excellent. Thanks for that overview. Let's start with thinking about which building they should relocate to. So what information would you need to know to calculate the financial impact of locating to either New York or LA?
So I would like to know about the cost of the rent. So I understand that LA has 400,000 square feet, New York has 200,000 square feet, but then the company only needs 100,000. So if it's the LA office, they have the 100,000 square feet they require, and then they can lease out the rest for 300,000, right? At this particular rate, $30 per square feet. Same thing applies for New York. So how about the rent itself for LA and for New York?
Yeah, we have that information. So for New York, the client will have to pay $40 per square feet per year for the whole building. And then for LA, they will also need to pay $40 per square feet per year for the whole building.
Okay, how about cost of service charge? About other costs that are associated with having the building in New York or LA?
Yeah, so there's some miscellaneous costs having to do with like adding the sign on top of the door, and we will sort of bucket all these costs into build-out costs, and we'll spread them out over 10 years. So for New York, those build-out costs are $1.5 million over 10 years. And then for LA, they will need to spend $500,000 in build-out costs over 10 years.
Okay, so aside rent, is there any other advantage that New York has over LA? Because this seems like since they would have the same rent, $40 per square feet, but then LA has after they take the 100 square feet required, for the operations, then they can lease out the rest for. Okay. So this is just okay. I'm just saying. Okay, so they have a lower service charge in LA, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then they have 300,000 square feet available that they could lease out at $30 per hour, right? Same applies for New York. So aside all of this information, is there any other information that would affect choosing LA over New York before I go ahead to calculate, the gains per se. But then is there other consideration that I need to think about?
Yeah, we have a little bit more information. What other financial considerations do you think could be relevant?
Okay. Financials, you have the rent, you have the service charge. Do you have any numbers on the number of interests in the office spaces in New York and LA to ensure to be sure that if we pick any of the locations, there will be sure to be customers to take up any of the available free space?
Yeah, the average vacancy rate, so the percentage of office spaces that don't get rented, people aren't interested in paying for that, is 10% in New York. And then the average vacancy rate in LA is 18%.
Okay. Average vacancy rate. Okay. Okay, so I would like to go ahead to calculate. I'd like to go ahead to calculate for LE. So since they have 400,000 square feet, and the company, the new merged company would require only 100,000 square feet space. So there's about 300,000 left. Of that 300,000, so they're renting okay, yeah. So the cost would be. So the cost would be so we have 40. Okay, so 40. So that would be 400,000 square feet times $40 per square feet. Okay. Same thing for New York. That'll be 16 million. New York has 200,000 square feet times $40. So that'll be 8 million. So it will cost, the cost of rent in LA will be 16. The cost of rent in New York will be 8 million. Now, how much would they gain? So okay. No. So, to cost them $100,000. So since they have, since LA has 400,000, square feet, if they decide, okay, let me just put this in this way. I'm starting with LA. If they take 100,000 square feet of the 400, paying $40 per square feet, then that would be 4 million in cost for rent. For New York, 100,000 and paying $40, the cost would be $4 million as well. Now, how much would LA gain from the free space? We have occupancy rate of 10%. I'm trying to see if I can factor this in. So basically, we have 300,000 left in LA, and if they rent this out at $40 per hour times 18%, 0.18. Okay. So that will be 300,000 square feet left, and $40 square feet times 18%. So that will be 2.16 million. While for New York, they would have 100 square feet left, multiplied by No, so LA is $30. Sorry, LA is $30 per square feet. So that would be 300,000 left times $30 times occupancy rate of 18%, 0.18. So that would be 1.62 million.
So to clarify, the vacancy rate is 18%.
Yes.
So the
Yes.
occupancy rate would be 1 minus. Okay.
Okay, yeah, so 0 minus 1. Oh, okay.
And for the rents they're paying in LA, do you think that they would have to pay for just exactly the amount of space that they're using, or would you expect that they have to pay for the entire building or the entire floor?
So the way I'm thinking about this is they have 400,000 square feet. So they're paying for 100, right? At $40, that's $4 million. And then they are leasing out 300,000. So there will be, their service charge. So the service charge is, so the eventual cost would be the 4 million plus the service charge of 500,000. So total cost that's coming to LA, to operate the office there is $4.5 million.
So they actually have to pay for all of the rent for the 400,000 square feet because they have ownership of it. So even though they're only occupied 100,000 square feet, they have to pay rent for all 400,000.
Okay, so 400,000. Yeah, but if they pay the rent for the 400,000, they'll recover that rent when they lease it out, right? So which is the reason why So the cost would be I get what you're saying, because
they're leasing the entire floor, but then they're subleasing the amount of space they don't need to occupy. It's almost like you're subletting an apartment that you're going away from in the summer.
Okay, so what I would do is 400,000, right, times $40 per square feet, right? That would be 6. Okay, that would be 16 million. Plus the service charge of 500,000. So that'll be 16.5 million that will cost the LA office. Now, the New York office as well will pay 200,000. Yeah, 200,000 times $40. That'll be 8 million plus service charge of 1.5. So that will be 9.5 million in cost for the New York office. Now, in terms of revenue, how much they will gain from leasing out the other space? So LA office will gain 300,000, right? Times $30 per square feet times occupancy rate of 82%. So that will be 7.3 for LA office. That will be 7.38 million. Now, the New York office, but then if the service charge is 500,000 for 10 years. So that means service charge will be 50. So that'll be 500,000 divided by 10. So that'll be 50K. Sorry. So the LA office is supposed to pay 50K per year. So that will be 16 million and 50,000. The New York office will be 1.5 for 10 years. So that will be 1.5 for 10 years divided by 10. So that will be 150,000. But then this service charge of 1.5 million per year, when they rent out, when they lease out to the other occupants are also supposed to contribute to the service charge, right?
We're assuming that the client will cover all of the service charge for the building that they're occupying. So if they're in LA, they need to pay the service charge for LA. But if New York, then they only pay the service charge for New York.
Okay, so since New York has $100,000 free, and it's $40 per square feet, and the occupancy rate is, so we have, 0.9. So that will be 3.6 million. So so in terms of deciding where to go to, the LA office will spend 16 million in for the office space, but then they'll be able to get from the new occupants using this assuming this occupancy rate, this occupancy rate of 18%, able to get 7.38 million, back. Now the New York office will spend 8 million, but they're able to get 3.6 million back. So that would be 16 million, 7.3, would be around 8.7 million already. And the New York office is already. So just by looking at these numbers already, the New York office seems to be the better option because the cost would be 8 million, right? Per year. But then they will get 3.6 million when they lease out the other space. So the total cost to the company will be 4.4 million. But for the LA office, when they, if they pay for the full building, right, because since it's a bigger space and they only need just 1/4 of the whole space, but then they have to pay for the whole the whole building at $40 per square foot. So it will cost them 16 million. Right, and aside the service charge of $50K, but then they would need to they only get in revenue of 7.38 million, leaving them with a cost of 8.7 million. So it pays to go to the New York office because of lower cost.
Mm-hmm. Awesome, thanks for that overview. And with that said, this would be if you're only occupying LA or New York, but because they're in the middle of a 10-year committed lease, they actually have to pay, the client actually has to pay rent at both of the buildings, whether they're occupying New York or LA. So how would you modify your calculation to take into account that even if HQ is in LA, they also have to pay rent on the New York building?
So if the lower cost,
so they're paying rent for both buildings, regardless of where the HQ is. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if they're paying rent for both buildings, but then the cost is higher at the LA office, and so I think it would make sense to but then if they said if they decide to stay at the LA office, they'll be incurring over 8.7 million in terms of costs. Then the revenue from the New York office, the New York office is already small, but it has a very high occupancy rate. Okay, I'll think about this in this. They could decide to stay in the LA office. So how much revenue? So if they decide to stay in the LA office and lease out the of the New York office, how much would they gain in revenue? So if they have 200,000 square feet and decide to lease the whole building, that would be 200,000 times 40. Okay. If they decide to stay in LA and lease out the New York office, how much would they gain? 200, but then they'll be paying, it's the same thing, they'll be paying. Also, they'll lease the whole 200,000 square feet. Okay. So I'll do the whole of the calculation again to be able to get the numbers. They have 200,000 square feet, and then they'll gain $40. $40 per square feet, and then the occupancy rate of 0.9%, so again 7.2 million. Okay. So what I would say is, if they decide to stay in the New York office, then they can lease out the 200,000 square feet, right? But then if the cost is $40 per hour, and then they are leasing it out at the same $40 per square feet, right? Then the only cost to them would be the service charge of 500,000.
Mm-hmm.
Now for the LA office, if they decide to lease out the 400,000, now they are paying $40 per square feet, but then leasing it at $30 per square feet at a lower occupancy rate. Then it makes sense for them to stay at LA and then maximize the revenue they can earn from the New York office.
Got it. And how much in LA would they get from subleasing?
From subleasing, I think it's the same thing with the other calculation I made. So they would take $100,000, right? To cost them to pick for the whole building to cost them 16 million. But then when they lease out the 200,000, they would get 7.3 million in return. So 16 million that will cost them minus 7.3 they'll get from the residents. So the difference is 8.7 million in costs for the LA office if they decide to stick to the 100,000 and then lease out the 300,000.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Perfect. So before you said New York City, with the revised calculation, we see that LA could be a better option. So what are some non-financial considerations in regard to choosing an HQ locations?
I'll consider the staff, the number of staff in the current staffing model. The staff preferences. So basically, the staff one. Two, aside the financial, right? The non-financial would be the shared infrastructure, since there'll be a merger, right? So where there's a greater portion of the shared infrastructure, then where the drivers of revenue, is it drivers of revenue, is it R&D, is it sales and marketing, where are they more located? Is it more in the East Coast, or is it more in the West Coast? All these other factors, that would, and then the products are being sold, right? And then the complementary product, since there'll be a merger, right? So where the main product drivers, the main sales drivers are, is it on one side of the coast or the other? So that would determine the other factors, that would inform the choice of the HQ.
Awesome, perfect. And now that we've gone through that, the CEO of the media merger company would like to hear your final recommendation.
Okay, give me a minute to gather that, please.
We'll be right back after this quick break. The best way to prepare for case interviews is through out loud practice with a partner. If you're looking for case practice partners, we can help. We have a free LinkedIn group you can join to find partners at your level and in your time zone. The link to join is in the show notes. In addition, we have a team of trained MBB coaches who can work with you via one-on-one Zoom sessions to help you get ready for case interviews. Whether you're starting from scratch or just need a little bit of extra help to get over the hump, our coaches have seen it all and will customize each session to your specific needs. If you're looking for a tailored and structured case prep program, look no further. Again, the link to join is in the show notes.
Okay, so my recommendation would be to stay in LA office and then rent out the New York office with a view to maximize revenue from the New York office, because either ways we would need to take out one office and then pay the rent for the other. So it makes sense to maximize the New York office since they have higher occupancy rates and the numbers are better. And then the risks with this would be that for the measures, there are other non-financial factors that are very important as well, like this, the staff choice, the staffing model, the infrastructure, right? So this will inform my advice for the next steps that the company should take. They should do a proper analysis of the non-financial factors. While the financial choice seems a bit obvious, to go to early, but there are other non-financial factors that are very, very important, like what is driving the business, the customers, where they are. So and then the staff, like the choice, for the staff. So looking at these other non-financial factors could even be more important than the financial decision, because it seems like a no-brainer to stay with LA and maximize the New York choice the year. So it makes sense to look at these other non-financial factors that might come to play to ensure that overall they don't lose market share and they don't lose market size.
Got it. Thank you for that information. And on your risk side, in terms of staffing and figuring out employee preferences, how would you start to collect that information?
Yeah, I'll look at the number of staff at both offices. Then what is so if it's so since it's a media company, right? But then I don't know kind of media company. So it depends on where the core of the operations are. So are there more staff? Like in terms of numbers or the key players in terms of staffing, right? Are they more on the West Coast, on the East Coast? Then what are the preferences? How would they affect the operation? So it's a media company. Are they shooting on site? Would it be easy to travel around? So what I would do is I would look at the core business after the measure. Then looking at this where the staff are in both offices, we could do a poll to see if the ones that will be affected, if they're willing to relocate, and how that will impact the core of the business.
Perfect. Thank you for the recommendation. I'll let them know. That's it for the case. How did you feel about it, Austin?
So I think I was expecting, so since it's a measure, right, I was expecting more discussions with regards to, this is the company that is being this is a target company, this company that has been acquired, this is the acquisition strategies, and then this would be the risks or benefits with regards to the merger. But then I was shocked that it was just two companies starting just about to merge, and it was about the simple choice of which office to go. And then in terms of which office to go, why would you go for one over the other? So you don't have to calculate the occupancy rate and all of that. So I was really thrown off a bit. I think I was expecting something different, but then it was just, basically these are just two companies trying to merge. Which should you pick and why? And then the math, right? Does the math make sense? Basically, I just felt that was it. I was really thrown off. I was thinking, it to be, so this is more of like a corporate buyer M&A case, but not in regards to synergies, the target being acquired, whatever strategy, whatever synergy you get from revenue or cost. It's just a basic, simple case of two various entities, and they want to buy, and they have two different offices, and then which office you should pick. So I was really thrown off.
Yeah, a little surprised. Yeah, this one is related to M&A, except it's not in the upfront due diligence process where we're trying to figure out synergies. It's more in the post-acquisition strategy of like logistically, which office, like staffing implications and all that. So I could definitely tell that you're a little bit surprised, but I think that you maintained your composure well. You sort of rolled with the punches when it came to the math. And so overall, I think that this was a good one. And I just have some pushes that'll sort of go like from top to bottom. So from the very start, I read the prompt. And the recap was good, but then your clarifying questions were pretty general. I really wanted to push you in terms of specificity, in terms of asking instead of what implications should there be between each of the locations, something a little bit more direct, such as like how much space it is, or even some of the questions that you had were really good after the conclusion of like, what is the core business? I mean, I said it was a media company, but there's so many different things within media. Is it like a digital ad agency, or is it actually like they're creating media assets for others? So that could have, that context going into it, even though the question itself is about like which location, those sort of other implications and understanding before you get into the structure, what the business is and how do they make money explicitly can help sort of like allow you to have more context and focus there. And then because of that, I had to give you some of the math assumptions early. I was planning to do that later. So more specificity in your clarifying questions would be good. I mean, went into the structure. That one was 1 minute, 57 seconds. So right in the 1 to 2 minute window that we tend to be shooting for. So that was good. For that, I would push you to anchor your structure on the question at hand. So I know like with M&A, typically it's the due diligence process or early on what we do in the private equity group at Bain. But this is specifically trying to tackle a more general question or like a more pointed question, I should say. And so your buckets should sort of fall into those. So having some flexibility around the structures that you have in your mind and adapting that to the question at hand can help to allow the interviewer to see like where your head is going and sort of step you through that. So definitely there is a certain cadence that M&A cases tend to follow. But if the case is actually something else or it's wanting you to focus on a specific thing, don't be afraid to customize your structure as needed. And then the actual points that you had, they're all very good for like an M&A due diligence, but and you also had like the 2 locations bent towards it as well, but more focus on the question at hand is good. Though some of the things that you said, like market share, revenue, profits, how are we growing, they're great if it was a pre-diligence case. So I know I made a lot of groundwork there. Before I move on to the math portion, do you have any follow-up questions?
Yes, I think it makes sense. Most times when you just say, what was the profitability case, your head just keep going, just start thinking about revenue, costs, fixed costs and all of that. Then when you're M&A cases, you just start. So yeah, it makes sense. I think it's like a very good reminder to always listen to the prompts and then follow the lead of the, like wherever they lean to, just follow and then be very adaptable. I think it's a very good reminder.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Thank you. So now we jump into the math. I gave you the all the inputs, and I know that this was something that was a big thing to focus on. I thought that you did the math really well. I think that what kind of gave us hiccups there is sort of upfront assumptions. So after you get a math question, taking a moment to yes, repeat it, but then also proactively state some assumptions that you want to make. So that way I can kind of course correct. I was trying to look for an opportunity for that would be appropriate for me to jump in and say, hey, no, we're actually paying rent at both locations, or like sort of adjusting your assumptions can get you to the answer. Because I could tell in terms of the arithmetic and getting like the numbers to add up in the line items, you could do that. But it was a little bit hard to allow me to jump in and adjust your assumptions to match the case. And I think what made that difficult in this one is that there's a few different things happening here. So we're occupying both spaces. So rent is happening at both spaces because we're locked in that 10-year lease commitment. So that's the main reason why we have to do both. But then there's also an opportunity to lease out both of those locations. So in the end, you got to the right answer, the numbers checked out. But after I sort of course corrected the first time about renting at both locations, I was hoping that you would push to realize that if they're on the lease for both locations, that means that they can also sublet or sublease at both locations. The difference wasn't answer changing, but it's just another sort of a sort of thing to take into account. And so in terms of advice for this financial portion, I would say, especially in a case that's as quantitative as this, invest that time up front to say out loud what your assumptions are, what you're kind of confused about, or even like taking a step back to voice over how you're going to approach each line item would be helpful. And even just saying like, okay, does this make sense? Anytime you get to the end of a calculation, doing that 400K times the $40, okay, this is like the 16 million for LA. Like, does this number seem correct to you? Sort of giving your interviewer opportunities to interject and course correct. It would be good. Eventually I got in there, but it was just a little bit, I felt like I had to interrupt you just a little bit.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And another thing that stands out in the math portion is that we got to all the way in the end in terms of what the overall annual cash flow will be for LA. And then we repeated that same process for New York. And whether you go to LA or New York, it's net negative. So that's something that you could comment on sort of along the way. Anything that sort of stands out to you, whether it be the fact that LA's vacancy rate is double the New York vacancy rate. I'm sort of having that thinking in the back of your mind in regards to, does this information make sense to me? Whether or not like the negative magnitude made sense to you. So anything, any kind of reaction that you can have to the math also shows your logic of the like business sense aside from the quantitative sense. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so. But I think the case was also very realistic. It makes sense that New York will have 10% because New York, like people are always looking for space in New York, and yeah, so I think numbers check that. So it didn't click as such, but yeah, it's a good reminder.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be specifically about the vacancy rate or just any. And this one didn't really have an outlier number or anything like that. But if there happened to be, then you could comment out how like the numbers align with your expectations.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we got to that, we got to the financial impact. You commented on that. And then I asked you about the non-financial considerations, which I think were good. It was mainly the staffing, the infrastructure, and thinking about in which location. And I think you were going with in which location would be best from a business point of view, like where are the clients actually staying at, where are the customers, and which location would be best for driving revenue. And so asking some of those clarifying questions about how they make money could help in the sort of creative portion. Because we said it was a media company, but if it were like a digital ads company where all their work is virtual, yeah, then it could potentially not matter. So that sort of thing can help you as well. Oh. And when we get to the recommendation, I liked your recommendation. You were answer first, so that's something that Bain really likes, just coming out with the answer, backing it up with the analysis that you did. So it's great to include any of the numbers. So I know that we had the numbers for LA versus New York. So calling that out in your conclusion in a couple bullet points is great. And then your risks are great. And anything to add that I would say would have to be just any next steps that you would recommend to sort of try and mitigate the risks that you identified. And that's it. Great job. Thanks for basically putting yourself out there, and I had a good time.
Thank you so much. I think this is a very good reminder, going ahead into the major interview season, you just have these ideas, you have everything in your head, but then there'll be a slight shift and you have to react to it positively. So yeah, I think it's a good reminder. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to another edition of our podcast. If you have ideas for a future podcast or a question on anything you heard today, please drop us a note, podcast@managementconsulted.com. We spend time every day responding to emails that we get from folks like you. All right, we'll catch you again next week.